Hello everyone, I'm Noam Wildberger, and we are looking today at a guitar. And I propose to change your point of view on the structure of the fretboard of a guitar, which is that part of the guitar where the actual notes are played. I want to change your attitude towards this by adopting this 12-tone chromatic scale as a foundation for understanding things. So letting go a little bit of our traditional naming of notes in terms of C, D, E, F sharp, G, etc., which ultimately is really piano based. Okay, it's important to realize that notation, and in fact also the notation that we use to illustrate notes on a page of music, that's really coming from the architecture of the piano. So it's fundamentally at odds really with the structure, the intrinsic structure of a guitar. Now, a guitar is a very important instrument, especially these days. In modern music, it plays a central role, absolutely central. And we'll talk about that more in some other video. But today what I want to do is to actually give you some concrete tools for thinking about the structure of music on the guitar, which I think is potentially really helpful for people who are learning to play the guitar. So if you're a guitar teacher, you might want to incorporate some of the things that I'm explaining here today in your methodology of instructing students. And if you're a learner, I think this can really help you. So we're going to be talking about the mathematical structure of the fretboard, but in particular, we're going to move towards chords and understanding chords, okay, which are a very important topic on their own. Okay, so let's have a look at the basic structure of the guitar. Okay, so first of all, there is a bar here, okay? That's sort of a starting point. And if we don't press down any of the frets, then we have sort of open position. And those 6 notes that you play like this are tuned in a certain important fashion. And that's represented by this very left-hand string of notes, which are telling you what those notes are with respect to a foundation, which is the bottom string, which is an E string, okay? That note there. So if we denote that note by 0, and that's a good place to sort of start because the guitar's architecture is quite conveniently expressed in terms of that low E. Then the subsequent notes are represented by the steps 5, 10, 3, 7, 0. And what that really is representing are steps of mostly perfect fourths. And in a chromatic system, a perfect fourth is represented by a 5-step. So we have a 5-step from here to here, a 5-step from here to here, a 5-step from here to here, because 10 plus 5 is 15, which is mod 12, same as 3. And then there's a 4-step. Okay, so the step from the string 3 to the string 2 is a little bit different from all the other ones, and that's a sort of a key point in the whole story of the guitar. So there's an interval there, which is a 4-step or a major third in traditional language. And then the final interval from the 7 to the 0 is another 5-step. So we have perfect fourths between each of the successive keys except between the third and the second. There's something a little bit different between these 2 strings. And then, however, the whole system is determined in a very mathematically pleasant way because each step from one note to the next note along the fretboard, so if I press this one down, and then I go up 1, going up 1, each of those is what's traditionally called a half tone or a semitone, but we're calling that a 1-step, and it corresponds to the simplest step on our 12-tone scale. So then it's easy to mark down the structure of all the notes, okay, by just starting with these ones here and just counting, but counting in a clockwise fashion so that when we get up to 12, we replace the 12 with the 0 and essentially start again. So we're just counting around a clock. So 0, 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 0. And this final bar here that I'm showing here corresponds to that one there. So telling you that this bottom E is the same as that. It's 1 octave higher. Okay, so there's actually 12 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 between the open and this one here. Okay, and then we can do that for each of the strings. So we just march up one by one Okay, when we get to 11, the next one is 0, and then we carry on like this. Then 10, 3, 7, and 0. And this way, we can pretty simply map out all the notes on the fretboard. And this is a hugely useful thing for students of the guitar, because now you can see in one glance what all the notes are on the entire thing. And of course, it's with respect to the low E, okay? So this 5 here represents the 5 step from E. That's a perfect 4th up from E. That's A, okay? That's an A. This one here is a 7 step up from E. That's like a perfect 5th. That's B, okay? And this one here is a 6th. The 9 is a 6th. 9 step is like a major 6th. That's from E to C sharp. And actually, if you note on the guitar, there are these 3 little marks right here, here, and here, just to orient beginners a little bit, okay? So those are the positions 5, 7, and 9 from the E, representing a perfect 4th, perfect 5th, major 6, okay? So, for example, that's E, that's A, that's B, C sharp. Okay. Now, it's really useful to stare at this, okay, and to look for patterns. So what kind of patterns might we look for? Well, the simplest thing is to observe where we have essentially the same notes, at least the same tones, okay? So in other words, like a 0 is representing a low E, that's the same tone as this 0. It's the same tone as this 0. That's an octave higher as a note, but it's the same tone. And actually this 0 and this 0 are the same note. They actually have the same frequency. The strings get sort of higher as we go up. Okay, so this is the high string, this is the low string. Okay, so if we just fix one of these frets, then as we're going up by a 4th all the way, except from here to here is a 3rd. So where are the other octaves? Where are the other tones for a given tone? Well, here, if you see this 0 here, you see that the closest one is this one here. Okay, so you sort of go up diagonally 2 to the right. That gives you another note which has the same tone, but it's higher. It's an octave higher. So similarly, you know, from this 7 to this 7. This 8 to this 8. It's the same throughout. And this is the beauty of the guitar, that it's evidently sort of translation invariant, that once you figure out a pattern with regard to a relation between a couple notes, it's easy just to translate that and in mathematical fashion just by adding the same step size to all of the notes that you're considering. Okay, so here is an octave interval. So these are all octave intervals. If we go in the other direction, maybe it's easier to start here. If we go to the left, we see that the nearest 0 is this one here. It means we're also going up the diagonal, but we have to kind of go 1, 2, 3 steps up. And maybe that's a little bit clearer if we sort of work with something in the middle. So if we start with this 5 here, for example, then going up to that, there's another 5. And if we go up in this direction, we get another 5 there. So let me illustrate that on the guitar. So maybe I'll do it this way, okay? So if we start here, let's say with that note, okay? So if I want a similar tone, I can go up 1 to this one. Those are the same. And if I want to go in the other direction, I start here and I have to go 1, 2, 3 up to here. So that's an initial orientation to the structure of the fretboard in terms of identifying octaves. The next thing that one probably wants to think about is what happens if you just go from one string up to the next string, but don't move too far to the left or right. So, for example, let's say we're here, okay, at this 5. If we go up in the same fret, then we know that we're going up a 5 step, which is a perfect 4th. Okay? So it follows that if we go from here to here, we're going one more step. Instead of taking a 5 step, we're taking a 6 step. Okay? And if we go from here to here, we're taking a 7 step. Now, a sixth step is not that important for most of Western music, but the five step and the seven step are crucially important because they correspond to the perfect fourth and perfect fifth. So going from here to here is a perfect fourth or five step. Going from here to here is a perfect fifth or a seven step. So that's a really important interval to know that if you're on the bottom rung here, then if you go up sort of one and over two, that's like a knight's move on the fretboard, you're going up by a perfect fifth, or as we would say, a seven step. And because the relation between these strings here, they're all subsequently the same. They're all a five step from the previous one, at least until we get up to here. The same relation is true in all these strings. So if we want to go from here, a knight's move up to here, that's also a perfect fifth. Or from here to here, that's also a perfect fifth because it's an interval of seven. It's not going to be true between the second and third strings, but it's still going to be true between the second and the first string. So going from here to here is still a perfect fifth or an interval of step seven. Okay, so coming back to this five, if we go up one, we get a perfect fourth or a five step. If we go over two to the right, that's a perfect fifth or a seven step. Also very important is what happens if you go from here to here. Well, that's a four step. Four step from 5 to 9 is a four step. And a four step is like a major third. Okay? And so that's also a really important thing to appreciate, that going from here to here is a major third. And going from here to here is a three step. As you can see by the numbers, okay, it's a three step, which is a minor third. And finally, going from here to here is a two step, which is usually called a whole tone. Okay, so all of these are really important. So going from here to here is a two step. Going from here to here is a three step. It's like the knight's move in the other direction. From here to here is a four step or a major third. From here to here is a perfect fourth, and from here to here is a perfect fifth or a seven step. And this diagonal one here is let's say relatively unimportant. Okay, so let's illustrate that. So okay, we'll start here. Okay, that's a perfect fourth or a five step. Do, mi, so, do. Okay, so it's do, mi, that's a major third or a four step. And do, mi, well, it's sort of a minor third, da, da, and a single whole tone, as in like the next note in the scale, do, re, mi, etc. Here to here is a two step. So those are really important things to remember. And once we've understood the relationship between this string and this string, well, it's exactly the same between this string and this string, and also between this string and this string, and also between this string and this string. However, there's a small exception to be made going from the three string to the two string. So for example, if we're here, okay, and we want to go up a perfect fourth or five step, we don't go straight up, we have to go diagonally over to the right. We have to go one further to the right than we would for the other ones. So if we want a perfect fifth or a seventh step, we don't take a knight's move, we have to sort of take a large knight's move out to here. And this one here is then the major third, this is the minor third, and this is then the two step. Okay, so two step, three step, four step, five step, seven step, going from string 3 to string 2. So I hope you can see the advantage in thinking about things not in terms of C's, D's, E's, F sharps, and so on, B flats, etc., but rather in terms of these numbers that include all the chromatic notes in our 12-tone scale sort of equally. Except with the idea that, I mean, there is a sort of a bass line because the guitar's architecture starts with this bottom note, this bottom E, okay? So there is, in some sense, sort of a preferred structure. And in fact, the nature of the open strings has a lot to do with further developments. But I think this is a great place to start. And it's also a kind of an environment where students, once they're familiar with this a little bit, okay, and maybe you have this, if you're a student, put this on your wall somewhere. Once you have that, then you can figure out a lot of other structures in a more intuitive and sort of logical fashion, I think. And I'm going to show you that when we come to talking about chords. Now I want to show you another view where we position our starting or our tonic somewhere in the middle of the fretboard rather than at the end. So this might be because you're working in a different key. Or it might be because it's just simpler to see certain patterns when we start with 0, because then the steps are a little bit easier to read off immediately. And in particular, it allows us to talk about the very important idea of the basic major scale and its structure on the fretboard, starting from the lowest string all the way up to the highest string. Okay, so there's a 0. Let's start there, and it doesn't really matter where in the fretboard we are, but we're just putting it in the middle here so we have room to go a little bit to the right and also to the left. Okay, so we're going to start here, and we want to get up to this 0, which is 2 octaves above, because altogether there's a total of 24 steps from here to here. Now from here to here is 1 octave, and from here to here is another octave. So we're essentially going up 2 octaves to get from here to here. And we can do it now in terms of a scale, okay? And we might as well choose the major scale, which is the most familiar one, okay? So what does a major scale look like based on essentially an arbitrary starting point at the bottom string? Say that one there. Well, remember that if we're starting with 0, that the interval sequence for a major scale is 2, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 1. Okay, so we start with 0, and then we go up 2, and then we go another up 2, and then we go up 1, and then we go up 2, up 2, up 2, up 1. Or in terms of sort of tones, tone 0, 2, 4, 5, 7, 9, 11, and then up to the octave. That's a major scale. And you can see that the guitar allows you to see that scale in a pleasant fashion, exactly as I've shown you here with these red circled notes. So 0, 2, 4, 5, 7, 9, 11, 0. And then if we want to carry on to go from this 0 to that 0, so the next octave, we start there, 0, then 2, 4, 5, 7, 9, 11, 0. It's not exactly a repeat of this because of this a little bit of a difference between the second and the third strings. Okay, so now this is like a basic pattern that all guitar players, well, serious guitar players or semi-serious guitar players will learn. So let me see if I can sort of do it. So let me start here. Okay, that's 0. Okay. Okay, here we go. 0. So the advantage is that I'm positioning my hand here in a certain way. So these 4 fingers are basically covering these 4 frets. So I don't have to move left or right. I'm just moving up and down, but the same finger is just covering that entire fret. That's really convenient. Okay, so how far we've gone so far? So now we're over here, okay? So now I have to keep going. So now I have to go to this 2. And back down. Okay, good. So you see, if you have this fretboard in front of you, this mathematical fretboard, okay, you don't really have to memorize something. I mean, you can basically just sort of read it off, or if you've forgotten, you can quickly sort of work out where you have to be just by reading the corresponding notes in the right pattern. Now, a variant of that is where we don't start on the bottom 6th string, but rather on the 5th string. So sometimes the bass of a chord is more natural on this 5th string. Okay, so for example, that would be corresponding to starting, say, with that 0 here. Okay, so let's build a major scale also from here. So here, actually, it's the same structure as down here, because the the relation between these bottom three strings is exactly the same as the relation between these three next three strings. Okay, so 0, 2, 4, 5, 7, 9, 11, 0. So if you memorize this pattern here to go from this 0 to this 0, then you can just repeat that entire pattern to go from this 0 to that 0. Now, if you want to go from, say, this 0 to that 0, then you're crossing the 3, 2 boundary, so you have to adjust things a little bit, okay? And so subsequently for further ones. So if you wanted to continue this one, 0, 2, 4, 5, 7, 9, 11, 0, you'd have to go 2, 4, okay? Then 5, you'd have to move over here, okay, so outside this box of 4 frets to this 5, and then up to the 7, the 9, and then you have to go all the way out to the 11 and the 0 out here. So you have to really move outside this sort of a channel for your fingers. Okay, that might be a little bit more dexterity is required. But starting from the bottom to the top, you can see that you can play a major scale quite pleasantly. And it's not much of an exercise to figure out, variants of this. Say if you're playing some minor scale or a blues scale or something like that, you can still sort of just do it just by sort of analyzing the fretboard and just circling the notes that are required. So in some sense, you can do a lot of learning just by sort of staring at this mathematical fretboard, I think, and appreciating the relations between notes that are represented by all these numbers. It's very convenient. Okay, so now let me introduce the idea of a chord, and I'm also going to touch base with our standard notation for illustrating notes on a page, on a printed page. Okay, so a chord, what is it? A chord is for us an ascending sequence of notes, usually played together. So there's something implicit in the word chord, is that we're playing them all more or less at the same time, although there are variants to that, but roughly, okay? And unlike scales, chords can extend beyond an octave. So we're quite happy to have a sequence of ascending notes that goes beyond an octave. Okay, so some examples. So the simplest chords, other than the intervals between two chords, which is usually not called a chord, is the 3-note chord called a triad. Okay, and here's an example of a triad in the usual notation that we have, where we have 5 bars, okay, and notes can be represented by these circles, and the circles are either lying on a line or lying in the space between two lines. And they each correspond, each one of these positions corresponds to essentially a white note on the piano. So this notation is very much based on the architecture of the piano. So already a guitar player might feel a little bit, compromised here, that this is not really ideal notation for a guitar, to be honest. But anyway, let's stick with it for now. Okay, so this is an example of a triad, a very simple triad, perhaps the simplest one that you can play on the piano, okay? Starting with a C, and an E, and a G. And if, say, we shift to sort of piano notation, where let's say we agree that C is the tonic or the 0, the start of our chromatic scale, then that C would be represented by a 0. The E, which is a major third, that's 4, and the G, which is a perfect fifth up from the tonic, that's 7. So these 3 notes are 0, 4, and 7. So this is how we might notate a chord, by listing the notes that are involved, actually the tones that are involved, in ascending order. But to distinguish it from a scale, we won't use pointy brackets, we might use braces. Okay? That alerts us to the fact this is a chord and not a scale. And moreover, we do not insist that the final note of the chord be the same as the starting note. That was a requirement for a scale. The scales always went from one note to the corresponding octave up higher. So this is not. There's just 3 notes in this chord, and there are 3 entries in this list or sequence. So we're just listing the notes that are occurring in the chord in ascending order. Now, the type of the chord, okay, the type of the chord is captured better by actually the interval sequence. So we'll also say that this chord has an interval sequence, just like a scale has an interval sequence, where we look at the corresponding steps that we have to take to go from one of these notes to the next. From 0 to 4 is a 4-step. From 4 to 7 is a 3-step. So the interval sequence of this chord, there it is there, I of C, will be denoted like this, with square brackets, the same notation that we used for interval sequence for a scale, 4, 3. But because this is a little bit unwieldy for sort of everyday usage, we'll also allow ourselves a simpler notation, all right? So let's agree that C, this chord here, is a 4/3 chord, where the 4 and the 3 represent the successive intervals required to go through the chord. So a step of 4, step of 3, that's the type of chord. Okay? So chords can start in different places, but as long as they have the same interval sequences, then we're going to consider them to be of the same type. All right, so this is a triad. This is actually a major triad. This 4/3 step characterizes a major triad. Okay, a little bit more complicated than a triad is a chord with 4 notes in it. We'll call that a tetrad. Okay, so that's the standard terminology, I think. A 4-note chord is a tetrad. Here's an example of such a thing. We have 4 notes now. In the standard notation, this is a note C. This is a note E, but it has a funny flat in front of it, so it's an E flat. This one is G, this one is B, but it has a flat in front of it, so that's a B flat. So there are 4 notes, C, E flat, G, B flat. In jazz, in music sort of theory, this chord has a name. It's a C minor 7. Okay. So in terms of our notation, this is how we would describe this chord. So the 0, and then the 3, and then the 7, and the 10. We're just illustrating the various notes in the chord in ascending order. The corresponding interval sequence, given by this thing here with square brackets, well, there's a 3, there's a 4, there's a 3. So this is an interval sequence of 3, 4, 3. And a little bit more shortly, we can just say that this chord is a 3/4/3 chord, or just a 3/4/3 chord. Okay, that's a nice way of describing what the chord is. It's a little bit more canonical than using this kind of notation. We'll talk more about this notation, but this is somehow more mathematically natural. We're just describing this chord with the minimal amount of information. Describing the chord type, we should perhaps say. Okay, the actual interval sequence doesn't tell us where the chord is, but it does tell us what type of chord it is. So here we have a chord with some notes in between the lines. This one's F, that's A, that's C, and that's D. Okay, in our system, again, starting with the base 0, this is note 5, this is note 9, this is note 0, this is note 2. Okay, so the chord could be described by this sequence 5, 9, 0, 2, and it's a tetrad. Its interval sequence is 4, and then from 9 to 0, it's the same as from 9 to 12, that's step 3, and then from 0 to 2, that's a step 2. So this is a 4/3/2 chord. Now in terms of traditional naming, well, there's a bit of possible ambiguity here. So chords that get more complicated can be interpreted often in different ways. So classically, you could look at this and say, oh, this is an F major 6, or just a 6th chord built on F. Or you could look at it and say, well, this is a D minor 7. Both of those would be sort of correct characterizations. But it's one of the advantages in sort of thinking about the chord as primarily described by an interval sequence, that's somehow freeing ourselves from any tonic relations that may or may not be lurking around. Okay, so there are other chords we could consider too, but starting point is triads and tetrads. And triads themselves are quite rich, and so let's talk a little bit about some of the possibilities there. So we've already talked about major chord. Here's another major chord, F, A, C. So it's a 5/9/0 chord, and it's characterized by having an interval sequence of 4 and 3. So it's a 4/3 chord, or triad. That's a major triad. On the other hand, if we interchange these 3/4 chord, like this one here, G to B flat to D, in our naming system, note 7, note 10, note 2, that's a minor chord, a minor triad to be precise. And over here is another variant going from B to D to F, note 11, note 2, note 5. Maybe we should say tone 11, tone 2, tone 5. Step 3, step 3. This is a diminished triad. It's diminished triad. It's a 3/3 chord. And here's another one which is a little bit less used, not as often seen as these three. It's an augmented triad. It's a 4/4 chord. So for example, E to G sharp to C. 4, 8 to 0, step 4, step 4. It's an augmented chord. Now, the world of triads, however, is a little bit more complicated because we can take any one of these triads and we can move them around. We can move the notes around by replacing any one of the notes with another note, say an octave above or below it. So this leads to the idea of an inversion of a chord. So for example, if we take this chord here, this I guess it's an F major chord, and we take that bottom note F, and we replace it with the F, which is one octave above, which happens to be that one there, okay? Then we get another triad with notes A, C, and F. That's note 9, that's note 0, that's note 5. It's still, note 5, but tone 5, but it's up there. In terms of intervals, well, we have an interval of 3, and then we have an interval of 5. So this is a 3/5 chord. So it's also a major triad, but it's an inversion of this one. So it's really the same three tones that are appearing, but the actual notes are a little bit different because we replaced one of the notes with an octave above. So similarly here, if we take G, B flat, D, and we take the G and send it to the G one octave above, then we get B flat, D, G. This is then a 4 followed by a 5. So this is a 4/5 chord. And because it's really the same as this one, it's also a minor triad, but it's an inversion of this one here. If we take this diminished thing and we, let's say, take the top note and bring it an octave lower, keeping the tone the same. So now we have F, B, and D, tones 5, 11, and 2. Then the intervals are 6 and 3. So we get a 6/3 triad. Now, this is, you could call it a diminished inversion, but I'm a little bit reluctant to do that. I'm not sure what a jazz theorist would say. It's a little bit far removed from the usual diminished, but okay, maybe you could call it this. Maybe people can tell me the proper name for that should be. But in any case, it's certainly related to this diminished chord by being an inversion of it. Okay, so it deserves the name of a diminished inversion. So the story of chords is complicated by this fact that we can take a given sequence of notes, okay, and we can invert it often in a number of different ways, okay, and it becomes, again, a little bit interesting from a mathematical point of view, and we'll talk about that later. Okay, so now I want to return to the mathematical fretboard and show you that you can locate these various chords, in this case triads, quite pleasantly on the mathematical fretboard just by looking at the numbers and looking at the various differences between notes. So in principle, a student of the guitar could just be told that a major is a 4/3 chord, a minor is a 3/4 chord, a diminished is a 3/3, and an augmented is a 4/4. And then they could be given as sort of as an exercise the question of figuring out how to play these chords on the guitar just by looking at the mathematical fretboard. So I'm going to give you sort of two versions, one dealing with the top 3 strings, strings 1, 2, and 3, and another dealing with the bottom strings 4, 5, and 6. So let's look at the top 3 strings. And I want to exhibit all 4 kinds of triads that you can play on the top 3 strings. Let's start with the major over here. Now each one of these can be played anywhere on the fretboard, okay? Anywhere on the fretboard. I'm just putting them here, 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 and here so you can sort of all see them. Here, this one here is a major triad because it starts at a note 0, goes up to 4, and over to 7. So remember this step here, because we're going from string 3 to string 2. This is not a perfect fourth, it's a major third in this example. So it's a 4-step. And then here we have a 3-step. Okay? 4-step, 3-step. Major third, minor third. Okay? That's what a major chord sounds like. So for example, on the guitar, if I could just do it like this, I get these two and that one. Okay, those two, it's the 0 and the 4, and this is the 7. And if I go do mi so, that's a major. Of course, I can move it around. I can go. Okay, so that pattern, you can see that pattern just from the mathematical fretboard. You don't really have to be taught it. You can just figure it out yourself. Okay, good. Now, how about a minor? So here's a minor. And I have to start somewhere else because I've already used the 0. So let's start on this 4 rather arbitrarily. Okay, so how are you going to figure out what the minor chord is? Well, it's a 3-4 chord. So you have to go up 3. You have to go to the 7. And then you have to go up 4 to the 11. So there's a minor chord, 4, 7, 11. Okay, what does that look like? So that's like these 3. Minor, right? Major was this. Minor. Okay. And again, you can play it, anywhere. Once you just understand that diagonal pattern in the top 3 lines is a minor chord. And then the diminished 3, 3. Well, let's start here at the 7. So 7 plus 3 is 10. 10 plus 3 is 1. So we have to play those 3 notes. Okay, what does that sound like? Okay, we'll just choose one of these randomly. There, say there, there, and there. Okay? Oop. Etc. And finally, this one over here, the augmented. Augmented is 4, 4. So let's start at the 10. 10 plus 4 is 2. 2 plus 4 is 6. So it's something like this. So it's like this. Those 2, and then followed by this one here. It's a little bit weirder, okay? So not as common as the other ones. But you can see that they're all pretty close to each other. There's just a small movement to go from that shape to go from that shape, and another small movement, just move that one over there, and you get a diminished, and you start the major, and you just move that one over there, and you get an augmented. So they're all very close. And what happens in the bottom strings? Well, it's something like that, but it's a little bit different. Okay, so the major looks like this. Say starting with 9, from here to here, that's a 9 plus 4 is 13. That's like a 1. Okay, so that's like a major third. Remember, that was a perfect fourth. That's a major third. And from here to here, that's a step 3. So this one, this one, this one is a major chord. So for example, the bottom one, so something like this. Do, mi, so, do. Okay. And a minor in black. So we start here. We have to go a 3, 4. So it's a 3 and then a 4. So 0, 3, 4. That's a minor. Diminished 4, 7, 10. That's the shape of the diminished. And the augmented 4, 4, 4. Just like this, going up the diagonals. Okay, so it's a bit of work memorizing this, but not that much work. And if you have one of these mathematical fretboards on your wall, you can consult it easily and sort of figure out what you should be doing. And I think this is a great learning environment for guitar students because we're bringing out the essential mathematical structure and distancing ourselves just a little bit from the usual nomenclature, which honestly is really piano based and is arguably not the best structure for the guitar. I'm Norman Laubiger. Thanks for listening.